Today I'm chatting with Oriana, who is the head of publishing at Kickstarter. The place I'd love to start talking about is actually Brandon Sanderson's recent Kickstarter campaign, because as I was reading his most recent book, You, Me and the Nightmare Painter, the other day, I saw that your name was actually in the acknowledgement section. So I'd love to know what your experience was like working on that campaign and kind of what was going on behind the scenes.
Cool. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. I haven't done a live interview in a while. Excuse me if I keep checking my hair. I came to Kickstarter at the very end of 2018. I actually got here to grow our journalism category. And then, I did that for a year and a half. It was COVID. Everything was insane. I wound up working, I came to the publishing side at the very end of 2020. And so I was still working. That was at the tail end. I think that was shortly after his first campaign, Brandon Sanderson, because of course the award-winning one, the one that broke all the records, was not their first time on the platform. The first time they did it, they only raised, I think, 7 million. So,
Only
not that
7
big a
million.
deal at all. Exactly. So I was already acquainted with the Cosmere team from that project before the big one came through. And so behind the scenes, we talked about it. It was super top secret, obviously. So, I knew that it was coming. We all had we thought it was going to be a big deal, 7 million, no slouch. But I don't think anybody, including Brandon and the team, expected it to go quite as crazy as it did. It was thrilling, obviously. There has never been a publishing project, I think even in certainly the top 10, possibly the top 20 all-time funded Kickstarter campaigns. So to now be number one by I think by 100%, I think the next highest funded project is 20 million. So yeah, it's pretty thrilling. It's great for books. It has obviously dramatically changed the nature of the conversations that I've been having with folks in the publishing industry. It's a pretty big deal for books, for authorial autonomy, for, taking control of one's creative and financial life and future. Not obviously everybody can be a Brandon Sanderson, but I think it really opened a lot of doors and opened a lot of people's eyes for what's possible here and how exciting it can be.
So you were talking about how Sanderson's Kickstarter really changed the nature of your conversation with a lot of publishers. How would you kind of describe those conversations that you're having with them behind closed doors?
What I'm excited to talk to publishers about is the way that Kickstarter can be used as a direct line to most diehard fans in a way that isn't really otherwise available through the traditional trade book selling process. That's part of the thrill of Kickstarter, is that you're sort of put into really close communication with both the audience that you have and the audience that you want. So for the audience that you have, you get to really let people feel like they're an intense part of your creative process, because they are. You can, ask people before you start what kinds of perks, what kinds of rewards, what kinds of projects they want to see during the course of the project. You can enlist them in your promotional efforts. You can, have people vote on iterations of the project. You can use stretch goals to make them more and more excited about the things that you're doing for them. And then when it comes to the audience that you want, a well-run Kickstarter should function like a marketing campaign, so you can make a splash, you can raise your profile, you have an excuse to shout from the rooftops about this thing that you're doing, especially the sort of limited term of the all or nothing fundraising. You get this sort of tangible urgency of now or never, do or die, all or nothing. We gotta, and that's sort of the agreement you're making with your audience. Look, I'm going to be screaming about this thing every day for about a month, and then you'll never hear me talk about it again. So I think that's some of the stuff that I like to talk to publishers about, and individuals. I think that Kickstarter can be used by any sort of person at any stage of their creative journey, at any level of their whatever size their audience is, to get that direct line and to, thrill people with this creative journey that they're taking.
That limited time aspect of it is so powerful, I think, because I've never spent $400 on a set of books before, but then when Sanderson's Kickstarter came along, I was there, lining up to put that charge through my card, and I'm really grateful I did, because the books are these really cool special editions and everything. I think it's interesting what you're saying about how it is this kind of complement in the way that you're presenting this to publishers, because when some of this initial success with the Kickstarters of Brandon Sanderson, for instance, started coming out, I think there was a bit of conversation around, is this antagonistic towards traditional publishers? Is this taking away their lunch? How would you describe their sort of reaction to this? Do they see this as something that is kind of taking away some of their appeal, or do you think it is a different type of thing altogether and it coexists alongside the traditional publishing model?
Oh yeah, I think you just need to, not you personally, but one needs to just expand the way that you're thinking about it. It's not a threat, it's not a cannibalization, it's a whole new way to reach your audiences. I mean, Brandon Sanderson is obviously the biggest, highest profile example, but I'll share another one. The fantasy writer Charles Sewell recently ran a campaign which I thought was very savvy on his part and the publisher's part. So he had a new book coming out. I think in like 3 or 4 months from when he ran the campaign, traditionally published with HarperCollins. And so in the course of writing that book, which is a fantasy novel, he sort of like, he had started thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to do all of these like big illustrations, these like maps of the worlds, these like extra, I can't remember, crests and various things. And I don't know, what conversations went on between him and his agent and his publisher, but it was decided that if he wanted to do a book like that, he would need to do it independently. And so what he did was bring that out on Kickstarter as essentially like a kickstart to the marketing campaign of what would then be the traditionally published book. So it was a limited edition, oversized volume, like the kind of big weird art book that maybe defies a traditional P&L. And so he only made it in a limited edition, marketed to like his most diehard fans. HarperCollins was on board. They let him do an Instagram takeover for a couple of days. They sent, they let use their mailing list to like spread the word for him. And then they used that as a springboard for the marketing for his traditional book. So that was fulfilling when HarperCollins was publishing the actual novel. So a new way that like people were thinking and talking and posting photos and videos about him and about his works helped market, the book too. So I just use that as an illustration to say like there's many ways that Kickstarter can work in concert or even augment the efforts of the traditional publishing industry. And of course, there's plenty of ways that it can circumvent it. There are lots of authors historically who have been unserved or underserved or ignored by the traditional publishing industry. And therefore Kickstarter allows them, this autonomy, this like way to communicate directly with their audiences that often, especially when you talk about marginalized authors or really niche authors, the traditional publishers have like not believed existed or really didn't know how to reach. So Kickstarter, brings back that autonomy, lets authors sort of like pave their own journey.
For sure. I think what's exciting to me as an author is that ability to bring more niche books to the market that would maybe struggle more if you would go through a traditional publishing model. Like I had a conversation last year with Aaron A. Reed, who did the 50 Years of Text Adventures games on Kickstarter. And it's an incredibly niche book about this sort of very small subgenre of video games, these text-based interactive fiction games, and just sort of chronicling those over the last 5 decades. And he raised he raised $250,000 for that. And that kind of blew my mind to think that you can have something that is such a niche passion project like that you can put out there. And because Kickstarter is a place that seems to really reward originality and uniqueness, maybe even more so than the traditional publishing or even the self-publishing worlds, which both tend to have, defined genres and certain audiences that they go towards. Would you say that Kickstarter seems like a very good place to go if you have a more niche or unusual idea?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, while you were talking, I remember that text-based games book, and it was incredible. There was another book not long after called Shift Happens, which was this big, oversized deluxe book about the history of keyboards. Talk about a niche interest. I think he raised $800,000. Like Kickstarter is absolutely
what?
Yeah. Kickstarter. I'll send it to you.
That's incredible.
Right. And so, yes, I mean, I think firstly, we're in like this moment, we're in that sort of like 1,000 true fans kind of moment, we're in a bit of a backlash, I think, from a few years ago when like the whole deal was you needed to have a huge number of social followers, and that was the way to indicate that there was an audience paying attention to you. But now I think you're far more likely to reach that audience, like you're better off having like 100 or 1,000 paying newsletter subscribers than 10,000 or 100,000 followers on any given social platform, because those are, we're so saturated. All of the algorithms are being tweaked every day to make it harder and harder for you to break through if you're not paying for it. And, like that direct line, those true fans, they've asked for you to be in their faces, in their inboxes.
Well, as you were mentioning before, that book by Charles Soule that raised over $60,000, he only had, 816 backers for that project. I would love to talk more tactically about, what you see as the differences between campaigns that are succeeding versus campaigns that aren't quite reaching the mark. I'm coming at this quite selfishly because I plan to be doing a Kickstarter for my next fantasy novel, Kingdom of Dragons, very soon. I've got the cover design all sorted for it, so hopefully we're going to be getting close to figuring out how to go about that soon. But, coming into this as a first-time Kickstarter author, what would you say are the most common mistakes that you see new authors making on Kickstarter?
The biggest mistake is not making sure that your ambition matches your reach. So whatever you want to do, whatever it is that you're making, this is a corny line that I wind up saying all the time. Everybody's thinking about the funding side of crowdfunding, but not everybody's thinking about the crowd. That is specifically what you're doing with this kind of fundraising. It allows you need, in order to be successful, you need to know who is in your crowd, where they are, how to reach them, and what's offer that's going to compel them to open up their wallets and click on the buttons to fund what you're doing. So, if you want to make an oversized hardcover, multiple 100-page photo book about keyboards, you have to make sure that there's enough people in your audience that care about keyboards and are willing to spend that kind of money on a sort of book as art object. So you don't have to have, you don't have to have ambitions of raising 700 grand, and you don't have to have thousands and thousands of people in your audience, but you have to know what is available to you based on who's in your communities.
How would you approach the idea of setting your funding target? Because I know this is something that a lot of new authors or just anyone coming to Kickstarter really can struggle with. This idea of, okay, well, I don't want to set my funding target too small because it might, constrain the upside that's happening from the project, but I don't want to set it so big that we never reach it and the thing falls through. So how would you be thinking about this, particularly from the perspective of, an author coming into Kickstarter?
Yeah, you need to do a lot of homework. You need to absolutely call those print shops, get those paper samples, understand your page count, your trim size, your budget, all of your actual needs. We encourage people to think about your funding goal as a floor, not a ceiling. So you want to ask for truly enough money to actually make the thing. I mean, we see a lot of people running campaigns with a $500 goal, which we all know that's not going to get you, your 500-page hardcover volume. You should, because, if you succeed, having asked for less than is required, you still have to make the thing. So now you're in a bit of trouble. You do want to ask for what you actually do really need, and also what you need to make the work of running a campaign worth it. If you're setting a goal of $500 and you only raise $1,000, has that been worth all of your time, all of your effort, all of your marketing? Should you maybe have been better off waiting, built your community a bit more until your network could bear a $5,000 or a $10,000 campaign, thus actually justifying all of that time and effort? That's a decision that every creator will need to make for themselves. But yeah, I think, we also get a lot of people saying, oh, well, once the goal is met, people will stop backing the project. That's not true. We don't see that at all. I mean, in fact, psychologically, a campaign that has already hit its funding target is likelier for people to back it because it's much more likely that it's going to get made. It no longer feels like taking a wild leap of faith. And you can use the mechanism of stretch goals or just your sort of network and your promotion to keep encouraging people to get on board, and to, if you decide to improve the quality of the product itself, if we get another $1,000, we're going to add French flaps or a ribbon bookmark or a full color signature for extra illustrations, whatever that stuff is, to keep making the book itself more and more exciting and to keep encouraging people not just to back it, but to tell their friends and, hopefully get more people in the door.
What would you say is the best approach that authors should be taking to promoting and marketing a Kickstarter?
Put your pre-launch page up like 1 to 2 weeks before you launch and consider that
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of your promotional period. We see an extremely high conversion from pre-launch page followers to project backers, and they tend to do it right away, day one, often the first hour. This is excellent for having a strong first day, which is good for morale, good for messaging, very good for your overall chances of success. So I would say efforts put into promoting that pre-launch page will absolutely pay dividends and be very, very good for any writer. We also will see a lot of people put up the pre-launch page and say launching soon and wait to actually press that launch button until they've got, 50, 100, 300 pre-launch followers to give them the confidence to actually go live. So, there's many ways that you can do that. But yeah, we absolutely recommend. The pre-launch pages are pretty new. We launched them maybe a year and a half ago, and they've really kind of dramatically shifted the way that people are promoting their projects and how they're considering, the length of the campaign.
Do you have sort of any interesting stats that book publishers or writers should be knowing about Kickstarter as they go into it?
In the publishing category on Kickstarter, the all-time dollars pledged is 349 million. The category has been on a steady upward trajectory since 2015. Every year over year, there's more projects launching, more projects succeeding, and a higher success rate. The current success rate in publishing is 54%. That seems low. So let me also tell you another stat that we look at is the success rates of projects with at least 25 backers. This is because there's always going to be a sort of like undercurrent of folks who are like closing their eyes, pooping out a campaign, and just waiting to be showered by magical internet money. The 25 backer mark is a real indication to us that you've gotten, that you're actually taking it seriously, that you've gotten beyond your inner circle, that you're really doing the work of building an audience and reaching that community. So with that wind up, the success rate in publishing for projects with at least 25 backers is 83%. So that's a pretty huge difference. The success rate for projects with at least 10 backers is 70%. So you're if you're doing the work, if you're taking the campaign seriously, if you're, thinking about your crowd and how to reach them and building that audience before, during, and after any campaign that you would run, your chances of success here are very good.
That is an awesome stat. It's crazy to me because like 25 backers doesn't seem like a material difference,
Yeah.
but the fact that that is enough to kind of separate you from 54% success ratio to like 83. That's pretty awesome to know. That honestly gives me a lot of confidence as a writer.
Good. Yeah. Well, it
That's
should,
awesome.
because that's what it's about. That's what you're doing here. You're building your audience. You're sort of assembling your community. You're reaching your crowd. And yeah, you don't need to have, exactly as we were saying about Charles Sewell, you don't need to have 100,000 followers on Instagram, and you don't need to raise, $100,000. If you understand what your community wants and are making something that they are going to be thrilled to have, you're going to do great.
Is there anything else that we've sort of missed in this conversation? Like anything else that you think is important for authors to sort of know when it comes to approaching Kickstarter?
I think that the first and most important step that anyone should take if you're even considering funding on Kickstarter is to fund some project on Kickstarter. Go on the site right now, back 5 campaigns, even for a couple of dollars, although you might as well get some cool new books while you're at it. But back those campaigns, follow the creators out in the world, and just watch what other people are doing. In addition, Kickstarter is a massive archive of Kickstarter. So you should absolutely be researching what people are doing now, what people have done in the past. Find all of the success and all the stories and tips and tricks that I share are from being extremely, extremely intimate with what goes on the platform. So study it. You can sort the site by successful projects based on number of backers or number of dollars or like date funded, etc. Look through how people describe their campaigns, how they structure their project pages. You can see every reward and how many people have backed it. So you can start to get a sense of like, what do people prefer? 20-song playlist of tracks that I listen to while writing, or I will call your mother on her birthday, like what sort of like, and like steal the best ideas. That's what this is all about. Think, look at the cadence of how often people are doing backer updates, look at the comments and how people are answering them, look at the videos and how people make them. It's all here.
Oriana, thanks for joining me to chat about Kickstarter.
Yeah, Jed, it was an absolute pleasure.